Hello there. My name is Charles H. Clyburn. I am a storyteller, and I want to welcome you today to the Maiden Voyage. Maiden Voyage because this is a journey we're going to take together, and today is the first of the step in that journey. So sit back, relax, and listen, and hope you enjoy. As I was saying, I'm a storyteller. A griot. Now, let me spell that for you. It's G-R-I-O-T, but we don't pronounce the T. See, griots were master storytellers back in the villages of West Africa, where my ancestors are from. Yeah, I'm from the Yoruba people. Yes, way back when, that is. And so griots were storytellers who not only would tell stories to whoever would listen, they were generally the elders of the village, or maybe they were just passing through as they used to do. And at night, around a campfire, they would tell stories. Now, one of the other things that griots did was they were the keepers of the history. They were also the bringers of the news. They kept the history of their people, but they brought the news to the villages of a drought somewhere else, of a birth of a child, for instance, or perhaps the death of someone that they knew, a loved one perhaps. So griots, they did a lot of things. They had a number of their job description, so to speak, was very vast. But so as a griot visited the villages, they were always welcomed, they were always fed, they were always, someone might wash their clothes, someone may fix their food, and so they were very welcomed because they always brought something with them. And one of the things they brought were their stories. Now, in the villages of West Africa, as I said, where my ancestors came from, they told stories about animals, mostly about animals. The reason being is because the people in the West African villages communed with animals. They knew that spiders were creepy and crawly. They knew that tigers would roar and had spots. They knew that lions were something to be respected, if not to be feared, because they were big and they were kings of the jungle. At least that's what they thought they were. And they knew that elephants were large. They knew that they were powerful. They knew that sharks swam in the water. They knew all these things because they saw them. They knew that snakes would slither along the ground. So griots brought their stories to the people. And they would sit around, as I said, perhaps around the campfire. They would have the people gathered around them, and they would tell stories. Now, one of the things I want to say to you is that when the griots came, they always asked the question, were people ready to hear the story? But what they said was, are you ready to hear the story? They would say, I go. And that means, are you ready to listen? And the people would respond, I may. So I ask you today, I go? Am I hearing you say, I may? Okay, that's good. So now we can start to tell the story. By the way, the series that we're about to embark on, again, the Maiden Voyage, is called The Art of Storytelling. Now, as we go along in this weekly series, we will have other people to come and tell stories. We will have people that come and visit us who will be guests, who will come and tell you stories. Perhaps some of them are true, some of them are made up. But They're always going to be entertaining, if not educational. So you can learn something from these stories and you can be entertained by them. But let me tell you this, a story is a story is a story is a story. What does that mean? That means very simply this, that you may have had someone in your family, an elder, an uncle, a grandfather, a grandmother, someone who is an elder in your family that used to tell you stories. And perhaps you sat on their lap. Perhaps you sat on the floor in front of them and they told you stories. Now, my generation, as I was coming up, when the elders would tell the stories, you were in awe. You were just wrapped up into the story. And you never once doubted that story was not absolutely true. Now, sometimes you begin to wonder if they stretch the truth a little bit. But, as I said, in my generation, you never asked that question. You took everything they said to heart and you believed it all. And until you got to a certain age, probably 16, 17 years old, as an inquisitive teenager, you might want to say, excuse me, but is that really true? I mean, is what you just said something you made up or whatever? But I got to tell you, my first experience with storytelling was with my grandfather. My grandfather lived some distance away from us. Wasn't too far to drive, but once a month or once every 2 months, we'd drive down to this little town in western New York, and we would go visit my grandfather. And we would sit on we would sit at the floor, we'd sit at his feet, and he would always tell us stories. And I remember my experience as being a storyteller came from that experience with my grandfather. I do remember the first story that he ever told me. What, you want to hear it? Oh, I'd be glad to tell you. Because, again, this is the Maiden Voyage, and we're about to embark on a journey of storytelling. So we might as well start at the beginning, at least what I remember to be the beginning. So here I am, a young lad, sitting on the floor at my grandfather's feet, and he would always tell us the story about his SIB teeth. Yes, I said SIB teeth, all right? Now, again, I never asked what that meant, but after a while, I began to understand, and my dad would explain it to me, that what Grandpa was talking about was his false teeth. And back in the day, false teeth were very expensive, if you can imagine that. SIB stood for some I bought. Yeah, that's what he called them. So anyway, Grandpa would tell us the story of his SIB teeth. And we would be sitting there in awe. And every time he told it, of course, that was the first time you'd ever heard it. Because you wouldn't say, well, Grandpa, I've heard that one before. So I'm saying, back in my generation, you didn't question those things. You just listened to it, you absorbed it, and you were thrilled by the fact that he was telling you the story. So, and again, we didn't see him all the time. So every time we saw him, which was maybe 2 or 3, 4 months past, and so when he would tell that story, we'd always be listening. We'd always look forward to it. So the story goes like this. Grandpa said that he liked to go fishing. And one day, he took the boat out and was fishing. He had a little rowboat. And he rowed out to the middle of the lake, had his little fishing pole, had a little bait on it, probably some worms or something he had found. Put the little bait on the hook, reached back and just threw that line out into the water and sat back and relaxed, as was his way to fish. He was sitting back and he felt a jerk on the line. So he grabbed the pole, and he knew it was a big one. And he was fighting the pole to try to get that fish in there. And he fought, and he leaned over to the side of the boat, and his SIB teeth fell into the lake. And as he went to reach for them, of course, he lost his pole in the water also. What a shame. I'm not sure whether he was more distraught about losing the teeth or his fishing pole. Probably the fishing pole. He's more attached to that in a way, because his teeth fit in, so they weren't kind of attached. little play on words. But anyway, so he lost his teeth and the fishing pole. So now he's really upset. So the only thing to do was to row back to the shore. He rowed back to the shore, tied up the boat, came home, looked at Grandma and said, "Grandma, I've lost my SIB teeth and I've lost my fishing pole. I'm really not feeling good today." So Grandma said, "Well, Grandpa, I know how you feel. And I'm really sorry about you losing both of those things. And I know those SIB teeth cost a lot. So we're going to have to do something about that. But in the meantime, Grandpa, to soothe yourself, I know you're upset, and to make this go away, I'm going to fix you some fried chicken." Now, that really lifted his spirits, because Grandpa loved Grandma's fried chicken. And so she went about fixing the fried chicken. She had a special way, a recipe of flour and salt and pepper and herbs and spices that she would put on the chicken, and she'd put it in this great big old cast iron stove and an oven and a frying pan it was. And so, she put the wood in the stove. We had wood stoves back then. And so she was frying that chicken, and Grandpa was sitting there, and he was smelling it, and his spirits rose a little bit, because as distraught as he was, he thought, the smell of that fried chicken is making all my worries go away. And so when he sat down to eat, Grandma had fixed some black-eyed peas and some rice and gravy and some macaroni and cheese and all the good things that he loved, and even some green beans. And so as he sat down to eat dinner that day with Grandma, they said grace, and he said, "Thank you, Lord, for allowing me to sit. Bless the hands that prepared this food. Bless the bodies who will receive it, because I really want to thank you, because I was so upset about losing my teeth and my fishing pole that I really need to take time to say thank you for this wonderful meal that's been prepared today." And so as he held Grandma's hands, they prayed, and he was not as upset as he was. And so when he ate the meal, he was just really very filled, not only with the spirit of what had happened, but also with the food that he had consumed. So Grandpa sat down then, and he and Grandma read the Bible, and they sat there for a while until it was time to go to bed. They went to sleep, and the next morning, Grandpa hit on an idea. He hadn't eaten all the fried chicken that night. There was one leg, one little drumstick left over. And so what he did was, he went and made himself another fishing pole, got a hook, got some line he had saved up, took that chicken leg and put it on the end of the line, and went out in the boat to approximately where he had been the day before. He had that chicken leg on the end of the line, and he said he threw it back and he cast it into the water, and he sat back, just taking his time, but he was holding on to the pole this time, he said. And so as he was sitting there, all of a sudden, he felt a tug. And he said, "Oh, I got a bite." And he started reeling it in and reeling it in. And he said it was pretty easy, so it must have been a small fish, he thought. He reeled it in and reeled it in, and up it came, that drumstick, and those SIB teeth were securely attached to the drumstick. And I said, I used to just look at him and I'd say, "Wow, Grandpa, you got your SIB teeth back." And he said, "Yes, I did." Now, as I said, as a youngster, I was always thrilled with that story. And I always used to look at him and say, wow, Grandpa, what a story. I'm so glad you got your teeth back. He didn't say anything about the fishing pole he lost, but that was such a great story. I really enjoyed it. But as I got older, as I said, I was probably 15, 16. By that time, I was sitting in a chair. I wasn't sitting on the floor in front of him anymore. And I was sitting in a chair listening. And as he told that story, he always had a little different twist to it. And as I listened to the story, and I said, as I got older, I was able to say, Grandpa, are you sure that story is true? And Grandpa would look at me, because that was the first time I'd ever asked him something like that. And he would look at me like, grandson, you are doubting me? And I said, well, Grandpa, I just want to make sure that, you're just not telling a story, that you're really like telling me the truth, okay? Because I want to believe this. And he looked at me one day, and a day when I asked him that, he looked at me and he said, son, everything I say in my stories is true, except that part that I make up. And I said, okay, Grandpa, which part is that? And he said, you have to figure that out for yourself. So that is how I remember my first story from my grandfather. And ever since then, I've always wondered if I could ever tell stories like he did. If I could have the imagination that he had. And as I begin to read stories, I begin to understand that what you have to have in order to be a storyteller, because all of you have inside of you the ability to tell stories. Because a story is a story is a story. That story I tell about my grandfather is true. Well, except that part that I made up. But anyway, you can tell that same story. You could tell a story. You can think about something that happened to you. You can think about something that happened between you and a relative. Little boys, for instance, think about your sisters, older or younger. Or young ladies, think about your brothers. I know you got stories about them. Moms, think about your children. Think about your husbands. Husbands, think about your children. Think about your mother and father. Think about what happened at school. Think about anything that has happened to you during your particular day as you move around. If you're working, if you're going to school, if you're playing outside in the playground, things happen. And that is what stories are about. They're about life situations. So you can tell a story, and all it takes is three things. One is your voice. If you can speak, then you can tell the story. Or if you know sign language, which I do not, you can tell that story in sign, if for those that understand that. So you don't really have to have a voice. You have to have a way in which you could tell the story. That's the first thing. The second thing you must do is use your body. Now, reason why I say that is because when you're telling the story, you want to be sure that people understand what is going on. You want to give them what we know as an audio-visual experience. You want them to hear you, which is the audio part of it, but you also want them to see, for instance, what you're talking about. As I said, when my grandpa threw that line into the water, that's what I did. I threw the line into the water. So you could see the motion. I used my body to help tell the story. I use my hands. I use my face. I make faces, or I do something that makes you understand the motion that goes with the story. So I use my voice in talking. I use my body as a motion so that you will have a visual experience of the story. The other thing that you gotta have, and that is an imagination. Now, reason why is because you might want to change the story from one time to another. Or if you heard a story like my grandfather's I just told you, you can now go out and tell that story. You don't have to say, hey, I heard a storyteller on Laurel cable TV, and he was telling this story about his grandfather, and I want to tell you about that. Now, you don't have to say all that. You can say, for instance, that you heard it from your grandfather. You can say that you heard it from someone else, a next door neighbor, for instance. That's where the imagination part comes in. You can use whatever you have to make the story work for you. It is your story. The story I just told you, I got from my grandfather. And that's the truth. And so now I had the story, but now I have given it to you. And so therefore, you can go tell the story however and to whomever you want to, because it belongs to you now. And once you give it to them, then it belongs to them. And that's how stories are handed down. That's how stories are given from one generation to another, from one person to another. And you can do whatever you want with that story once you have it, because it doesn't belong to anyone, except that now that story belongs to you, and you therefore can do whatever you want with it. Okay? So now, I want to tell you, first of all, let me greet you in 3 ways. Let me, first of all, say hello. Those of you who speak English understand that. And so I want to say hello. And I also want to say to you, for those of you who understand Spanish, I want to say buenos dias. If you don't know what that means, it means good day. It is the Spanish language. Now, I also want to greet you in another language of Arabic that says assalamu alaikum. Now, what does that mean? That means peace be with you. And as Arabs greet each other, or those of the Muslim faith greet each other, that's what they say. In response to that, people say, as-alaikum salam, which means, and with you too. So I greeted you 3 ways. I greeted you with hello in the English language. I greeted you in the Spanish language when I say buenos dias. And I also greeted you in the Arabic language with assalamu alaikum, to which you would say wasalaikum salam. All right? Peace be with you, and with you too. All right. Now, why did I say that to you? Well, I said it to you because I wanted to educate you in the languages in which other people speak. If you didn't already know that, you may have. And so I'm just trying to impart something to you so that you will understand. Now, one of the other reasons why I told you that is because in the art of storytelling, again, you want to use what you have. I use those terms so now I can tell you the story that I want to tell you. Because you knew that was coming, right? Okay. The art of storytelling. Here we go. This is a story about a family. All of us have families. All of us have uncles, aunts, fathers, mothers, cousins. And so we sometimes know that we have a mother in a family is the matriarchal figure of the family. They are the ones who do a lot of the things. This particular family is a family of mice. Yes, of mice. We have Mother Mouse, who has 3 little mice children. First one's name is Mickey Mouse. You all have heard of him. And he had a sister named Minnie Mouse. And a lot of you have heard of Minnie Mouse. But you might not have heard of the other brother. His name was Mortimer Mouse. Yes, Mortimer. Mother Mouse took her children out into the tall grass to play one day. And as they were out playing, now Mickey and Minnie used to play together. They were over here playing. Mortimer was kind of a different child. He was over here playing by himself. He always was a different kind of mouse. And so as Mickey and Minnie were playing over here, Mother was just watching them. Mortimer was over here. And as Mortimer was playing in the tall grass, he looked up and he saw the green eyes of a cat. And he said, Mother, there's a cat over there. Mother said, Mortimer, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. And Mortimer, believing in his mother, as you all should, as we all do, went back to playing. But he looked up and he saw the cat getting closer. He saw the cat down on his paws. He saw those long whiskers, and he saw the cat licking his lips. He said, Mother, the cat's getting closer, and I think he wants to eat us. Mother Mouse said, Mortimer, I told you I would take care of this. Don't worry about it. He said, okay, and he went back to playing, but then he felt the hot breath of that cat. He felt that cat breathing down on him, and he knew that he was very close. He saw those green eyes start to sparkle. And he said, Mother, the cat is real close and he's about to pounce on us and eat us up. And Mother Mouse said, Mortimer, I told you I'd take care of it. And just then, Mother Mouse rose up on her hind paws. She just stuck out her chest and she looked at that cat straight in the eye and she said, woof, 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 woof. And that cat ran away. And she gathered Mortimer and Minnie and Mickey together. And she said, children, the lesson for today is that it always helps to be able to speak a second language. Thank you. And so that's the moral of the story today, that you need to learn how to speak a second language. You need to know, if you go to school, you need to know how to say something in a different language because you meet so many different people. So I tell you that story so that you will understand that. Again, as griots do, we always tell stories about animals. And other times we tell stories that will answer questions about how you should live your life. That fits in both of those categories. But this is the Maiden Voyage. For today, we start out in a series of the art of storytelling. So next week, we're going to have another series, and who knows who may show up to tell you stories. So stay tuned. Laurel Comcast Cable TV, Channel 12, and we'll see you again. And thanks for watching.